Welcome to Totally Classic, the podcast where every episode I, Brendan McNamara.
You know what, Brendan?
Yep.
I don't have headphones on, but I'm wondering if we should do a little sound check because your might be slightly hot. Are you
Is
controlling
it?
that on your end?
I am. I can crank it down right now. I'm cranking it down right now. If I go loud, I can crank it down here. I cranked my gain up because it was super quiet last week and I might have over cranked.
You may have overcranked. It sounds like fuzzy on the top end.
Yeah, that's not good. How about now? Any better on your end?
That's better.
Yep. I dialed it down like I don't even know what it would be, but 15 somethings. I dialed it down 15 somethings.
15 somethings.
Yep.
Wonderful.
Welcome to Totally Classic. My name is Brendan Mac. Hey guys. My name is Brendan McNamara. This is a podcast where every episode, my friend Andy and myself dig into a topic that seems to be sowing contention amongst peoples. And I love a good amount of contention amongst peoples because it shows me that people are striving for something, but I don't think it needs to be so contentious. Isn't that funny? So every episode we get together and talk through something that we think we might either disagree on, or perhaps we're exposed to very different cohorts who radically disagree on, in order to show folks it is always possible to strive for understanding longer than it takes to just write a trollish comment or scream at someone out of your car window as you drive by. And this week, what is our topic? What did we land on? Should we trust the corporate media? Or should we trust corporate media? Let's take the out, like Facebook, right? We just fixed it. I Sean Parker that so hard.
Lose the.
Who's the genius? I feel like this topic has penetrated a multitude of topics across the past year plus that we've been doing this podcast. And it factors into my daily sort of social media output, such as I see my responsibility therein. And the inspiring incident really would be myriad. But this week, back and forth on our text thread, I've been sharing about the McDonald's incident, McDonald's gate. This past week, aspiring President Donald Trump in
Hey, Brendan.
Yeah.
I'm going to pause you again because I wonder if you might want to go another 10 or 15 somethings down.
Okay. I went 10 or 15 somethings down.
Okay.
Testing. Now I'm testing. So this week, I'm leaving a pause just because I can see it easier on the audio timeline. Just this week, aspiring President Donald J. Trump staged an event, worked at a McDonald's, handing out fries and stuff to a line that stretched out of the McDonald's for miles and miles of people getting to take part in this, essentially a political stunt. So he worked at a McDonald's for whatever, an afternoon, or probably however many hours they were feeding the allotted number of people. Shaking hands at the drive-through. And sure, this was just yet another in whatever, a lifetime of, the glitterati showing that they can hang out with, the filthy proletariat. And however, this one was very specifically a trolling event of his opponent, Kamala Harris. I don't actually know her middle initial, or I would have given it here. Apologies for the bias and not knowing. Kamala Harris has repeatedly claimed, I think throughout whatever her campaigning, I think multiple campaigns for various things, and said she worked for McDonald's as a kid. There's no evidence for that claim. Snopes, which is left bias fact checkers, just calls it unfounded. Kamala D. Harris, thank you for the assist, Andy Swindler. So it was a trolling event, worked at a McDonald's. The corporate media very heavily, and I shared multiple examples of this in terms of headline as well as like broadcast with Andy this week, and I thought it was an amazing example of media bias into like why you would distrust the media. Quite almost universally represented this as Donald Trump. First of all, he didn't really work in a McDonald's. The media has been hilarious this week in terms of that. It also there was like an AI picture of Donald Trump as a Pittsburgh Steeler that the mainstream media was like, just so you know, this is not really him. This is his arms are much more muscular than in real life. It was just like, I don't know why corporate media decides it has to tell us things we already know. Donald J. Trump is not really an employee of McDonald's. Thanks, guys. We're pretty well aware of that. Sometimes legacy media seems like a demented individual in the corner just shouting at random things. Anyway, corporate media wildly broadcast the story as Donald J. Trump making unfounded claims about Harris. And so he staged this event in order to highlight these unfounded claims or misinformations. When in fact, the truth is both the claims are unfounded. We don't have evidence that she didn't work there. We don't have evidence that she did work there. But I was like, this is a great example of just profound partisan capture that has led to what we are all dealing with now, which is an October Gallup poll, very recent, folks, found that 31% of the U.S. population have great or fair deal of trust in the mass media. The rest are into very little trust or active distrust. So the overwhelming majority of Americans do not have trust in corporate media. However, what do we think about that?
Well, Andy Swindler, have some thoughts about that. Although any of our regular listeners would know, have done far less research than Brendan. So one thing I'll speak to is how we met. When we met, I was in journalism school in the late 90s. I did not technically graduate with a full degree. I had enough credits to get a minor, which was sort of a weird shoehorn thing when I switched majors. I enjoyed journalism school. It was a great writing program. And I realized I didn't actually want to go into journalism. And I've contemplated that a few times. Part of that's just seeing how hard it really is. If you want to do it ethically, even back then, I think it's really a hard profession. It's a lot of hustling. It's a lot of connecting dots. It's a lot of fact checking, which we've talked about many times, seems to not be what people always love to do these days. In fact, in Medill, you would get an F immediately if you misquoted somebody.
Yes, the dreaded Medill F.
So that doesn't necessarily give me credibility. It's just a little story to share as I've reflected on it and as I've witnessed. I think the corporate media, the phenomenon getting even worse of media and news being corporatized and consolidated and monopolized. And as we would see in James Bond movies, clearly used for nefarious means.
Yeah.
In some ways, I'm glad I didn't go in, and it actually gives me that much more respect for the journalists who really are doing the hard work.
Yeah. I've seen a lot. What I think remains under discussed, and this is one of the advantages of being older. You and I lived through the time, what is like 20 something years ago, where with the rise of the internet and starting to take dominance in these spaces, there was quite a bit of cost cutting as newspapers especially started realizing, okay, here's how we can employ this. Here's where almost everybody's starting to go anyway. Man, we're employing a lot of people that are kind of unnecessary or redundant. And at the time, journalists, sure, biased that they didn't want to lose their jobs, but career journalists were decrying this and being like, this is a mistake. You can't keep cutting editors and layers of editors and blah blah blah. And of course, yes, some of that was protectionist, but some aspect of it, I believe, has played out quite fully in society as the profession has been diminished in number and has become. This is something I've sort of gleaned from Matt Taibbi, journalist or multi-generational journalist, Matt Taibbi's generation work was that over time, journalism has now kind of become more of almost like a social sciences type profession in terms of the demographic participating in it. It kind of used to be more of like a bootstrap C, like just like work. It's a working class job. Like you show up, you get the quotes, you bang them out. You know what I mean? And over time, it's become flashier and flashier. And of course, as internet like the anonymity of journalists is by no means really even possible anymore. And so the rise of punditry on television means actually the stronger voice you have as a writer, the more likely you are to make ancillary income, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really fostered a whole creation of journalism that is unlike journalism that certainly we grew up with. And I would say even 20 plus years ago was not the norm. But I feel like now we've fully come into like subjective journalism being the norm. And listen, I indulged in it myself and was kind of a proponent of it in college. Like when I was writing for arts papers or whatever, it was like, I don't like the dry, fusty thing. I want to put color, oddity, whatever, a little as much Hunter Thompson strangeness I can put in it. I want it to be fun and vibrant and maybe even a little chaotic and somewhere between the highfalutin and the low class. I kind of want it all crammed in there. So I get it. I'm probably part of the problem. But we are at a point now where even objectivity is something that journalists of great repute have already sort of come out in some ways come out against, or sort of like that's we can the suggestion is we can evolve past objectivity. And I would say for most people that is not really what they want out of corporate media. Like in some ways you kind of want them to be the safe space. But again, I also see because of that generational difference that we lived through, I see a wide difference in how people would answer this question over different age ranges. And that plays out in polling too. But I think just even from lived experience, I've watched that happen. And now I'm one of those people who like fact checks my parents on on news things that they share.
Well, you're right. One thing you bring up, and this is sort of a one little cross section, but the economic shifts, right? My understanding, oversimplified, I'm sure, but basically Craigslist and other forms of online advertising just gutted the classified ads. I mean, that's really where a lot of newspapers in particular, I don't know where there's newspapers, there's broadcasts, there's all kinds of different forms, but newspapers anyway are probably in some ways a clearer example of why they got hit so hard economically. And they didn't shift. I mean, even those who saw it coming, it's you have to get really creative. And I think, as you said, that just growing up, I'm just reminded of, I don't know. I mean, that was an age let's say the 80s primarily, early 90s, pre-streaming, obviously, even pre-DVR. So you pretty much, in terms of broadcast journalism, you just watched like the three major networks. I mean, even pre-Fox, right? Like, and so you had your choice of one of three old white dudes to sort of comfort you every night and sort of tell you what was going on in the world.
And Connie Chung.
That's right. And then maybe you could watch 60 Minutes on the weekend. And it's I don't even say comforting facetiously. Like it sort of was comforting because it sort of felt like they were an anchor, right? That even that term is like, oh, they felt grounded and like they knew what they were saying and they knew what they were delivering, and it felt truthful and it felt like well researched for the most part. I'm not saying it was. I'm just saying that's what it felt like. This is my lived memory of being a child and being like,
yep.
Is the nature of even beyond news, like general media consumption, of just the idea that we all used to only have a small number of things to watch and they were all broadcast live. And so the next day you could pretty much all talk about the same stuff. So the other thing I
Yeah.
think has happened is just across even every dimension of media is just this total fragmentation, which of course creates way more voice and choice. And at the same time,
Yep.
I'm just contemplating how much of that trust, for right or wrong, was actually born out of just a really incredibly limited funnel, of like what was even
Yeah.
available.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I agree that it fostered a unanimity of at least input. Uh, so then we can see out of the fragmentation uh, a loss of unifying blank, fill in the blank. And in some ways, I feel like we're now, as a consequence, in a like almost a pre-Civil War vibe, where we have these very resolute now chunks of society who hold to a unified vision that's very different from the unified vision of, again, somewhere in that 30 to 40% of the country, uh, which is scary. And in some ways, you can almost understand the desire for monolithic control over media as a way to foster unity so that the chaos that comes from disunity will not transpire. So you can even, even if things are being grossly manipulated, you can almost understand the pragmatic, the Machiavellian motivations of that. I am going to go ahead and say early, I'm one of those people who has very, very low trust in corporate media. That is a new thing for me. That is, I'm probably 4 years really into that as an active thing. I think I had a general mistrust, but I think I would have answered to like polling questions. I would have said, I have a fair amount of trust. Now I would say I have a fair amount of distrust. I don't simply think everything that I read is just utter hogwash. But I'm at this point having questioned and gone down like to validate sourcing and conclusions often enough as to be like, oh dang, some of these things don't even make sense in their surface. And then now some of the things are portrayed in the same old school fashion, which like makes my cognitive dissonance go, this must be real because they're saying it more seriously. Um, Realizing that that's that can be grossly inaccurate content as well. And the interesting thing is, I feel like we are still trapped a little bit in the in between, and we're still trying to figure out where we're at, which is I feel like why people feel more unsettled. If we just like 80 or 90% agreed that the media wasn't to be trusted, I think in some ways that would be its own unity and we'd actually feel pretty good about it. But we have still this disruption, especially when it comes to like newspapers. I would say a lot of them, like at New York Times or Washington Post, can be as biased as an MSNBC or a Fox News or OAN or whatever the heck is way out there on the right. Um, so, but it's still presented in the same way. The newspaper still functionally looks the same. And the same thing for like broadcast, like news things, even like a 60 Minutes is still presented in the classic style. So you would think, oh, it's presented in the classic style. It must be created in the classical ways. But a lot of times it seems like it's not. Like what we have in those sort of more opinion-based programs, which we are aware of, right? When you tune into a Rachel Maddow or a Tucker Carlson or whatever, where it's kind of like one person kind of opining, doing something between a Cronkite and an Andy Rooney to throw it back for the old heads. Then you kind of realize, oh, okay, we're in opinion world here. However, the times when people are just like more seriously intoning, like I don't know, Wolf Blitzer or Anderson Cooper or whatever, the same thing is happening. It's just happening via, they're not then sort of hinting into monologue. They're just spiraling out pretty biased takes that would make any rational person distrust them. And we had back in 2023, I think I talked about this on the podcast at some point, Leonard Downey Jr., a former executive editor at Washington Post, professor at Walter Cronkite School of Journalism. And he wrote in January 30, 2023, it's the Washington Post, anyone can look this up, newsrooms that move beyond, quote, objectivity can build trust. So again, this is not only just a phenomenon of kind of economic consequence or fragmentation, but all of that leading to like a statement of principle that I think all trust is based on for news organizations.
Well, one thing that brings up for me is MSNBC
Hmm.
as a concept, and I
Yeah.
remember hearing a few years ago. Hold please.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, with MSNBC, I never watched it religiously. I was more into, I think, as we've discussed, like filtering my news through progressive comedians because it was like a sugar-coated pill.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and now I can like the snark is usually like just too much for me. But I would watch my parents religiously watch in MSNBC and
Yeah.
eventually really started to wonder how different it was than Fox because it
Yeah.
was just so self-validating. It just
Yeah.
felt like
That's
you almost
definitely the
didn't
format.
need to
Yeah.
watch it because you're like, oh, I
I
already believe all of this.
I know
Yeah.
what they're gonna say. Yeah, definitely. It's interesting. Both Fox and NBC, and I think Fox is to blame for this as a tip of the spear. Um, but the bias of Fox and MSNBC are pretty similar. I think MSNBC might actually be farther left than Fox is right, except when it comes to like opinion sections or whatever. But yeah, MSNBC or Fox are both a problem if you absorb that with the same however our brains this is almost a neurological question, however our brains and psyches take in news as we've understood it for most of our lives. I think that's why it was so disruptive for me to be like, oh wow, news is shot to hell in terms of objectivity and is shot to hell in terms of reliability, because I grew up with, at least with that, I grew up with that sense of like, well, this is what the news does. And even though you kind of know it, like MSNBC or Fox, that they're presenting it with a spin, like no one, no one can have any false illusions that these aren't spun networks. But you're still like, yeah, but they're still basically telling me like what is going on, which can sometimes be true. But again, this McDonald's thing is a great example because it's like, oh my gosh, let's be honest, who really cares about whether she worked at McDonald's or not? But this, you can report it accurately that Trump, based on this unfounded claim, you're like, oh, that's true. But it's an unfounded claim about an unfounded claim. So it's that bias by omission is so glaring, as I was just like, what is happening? Like, and this is, it was such a media trust thing as to spiral into, this is going to affect regular people, like people who actually go to McDonald's. They'll be like, eventually they'll ask, well, wait, did she? Who's lying here? Like, because who did, like, I don't, and again, I don't understand. Maybe this is why I was talking about the newsrooms being like stripped down or exactly classified. There's a huge economic reason why. Is there not someone at the New York Times or Washington Post who's still a journalist who, in 25 minutes, can even run illegally a social security check? But this should take 20 minutes to validate, right? If you, this is literally like if you're in the business of doing this sort of thing. So instead, it's a war of literally intentionally creating a news of he said, she said. So that's the super danger, I think, too, is just giving, if you keep giving people 50% of every story as though it's 100% of every story, in some ways you're even more grossly misinformed than if you had ever never heard the story. And so yeah, MSNBC can be wild. Or same thing with Fox. And I get super afraid. And I guess I've only walked into these households a couple times, but there are households in this country where people have like the news on, like kind of always, like has background noise, like it's just on in the house. And that would be, I think, even more frightening, because I've watched, even just as a non big corporate but small corporate media, um, I've watched it happen like with my my dad more than anything, because my dad has like cable and streaming and all that sort of stuff, and then listens to political podcasts a lot, but kind of only from like a particular bias. And so I've watched him post things sometimes if he's in an agitated state, multiple times a week, that are like demonstrably false or demonstrably like misrep or 50% true, you know? And I'll be like, here's this, here's this, here's this, here's that. And honestly, sometimes it doesn't even work. I can literally send him a transcript and a video, and he's like, no. And I'm like, oh no. So that gets into the realm of like full on reality denial, brainwashing, that sort of thing. Not that that's not popular. It's around everywhere. I only have a slight advantage in that my mom and stepdad don't have a television. So and then I don't even think they have a newspaper subscription or whatever. I'm assuming most of what they listen to, if they or peruse, is going to be anywhere from center to right, and I would assume very little left. So I'm assuming they are intaking biases. A, but they just, or B, but they don't talk about it as much. And C, by virtue of not having that delivery device to kind of fit into the old format of this is the reliable news thing that I am watching. That I think in some ways is our advantage for our brains as relates to newer media, like a podcast, or if someone goes on Joe Rogan or whatever, like my immediate instinct isn't they're presenting all of this as though this is fully validated facts and the whole truth and nothing but the truth and the most comprehensive version of the story we can possibly deliver. I was like, this is just two people talking. Okay. My brain knows how to filter that. And so therefore I think it's less dangerous or less worrying because you're just like, well, this is just two people talking. Which again, this is how I've started to regard pretty much all media. I was like, this is just a person talking. It's a person talking. I can't assume anymore that this has been fact checked, that this has been editorially checked for bias. I can't even at this point assume that objectivity is part of anybody's desire for this to be like the clearest, like least biased presentation of the story. Partially because it doesn't pay, and I don't know if it gets the same clicks, and because it's being sort of openly abandoned, to where even a centrist bias publication like the Free Press is a good example, is so like pronounced in how much they talk about how centrist they are that you're like, oh my gosh, this is like an intentionally subjective like expression of a centrist and an aggressively centrist bias. And then you're like, oh my, like it's the bias is so big and so written. So for a long time, my primary concern has just been like trying to make people aware of something I wasn't aware of. Like I didn't know how biased news had gotten across the spectrum. And so I worry for people who don't know that. A, because it just creates fear, and B, because they're walking around believing falsehood, which doesn't sound beneficial to anybody's progress as a human being. But how do you do like, but then, but engaging with it, I find it kind of difficult generationally.
Well, it is. And as we've started to discuss more recently, actually, it just from what I know of like, coaching and human psychology, we process information differently, and we solve problems differently, and we have different abilities to do that. We have different bandwidth, we have different attention spans. I mean, that we covered a lot of that in the last episode, actually. And yeah, so that's very, very challenging in a world where all of a sudden so many of us, and sometimes it's me in the morning, just letting the algorithm feed me 3 videos and being like, oh, well, that's interesting. Now, like you, I think I have the advantage, and actually our conversations have helped me develop, right, fine-tune this advantage of really taking everything with a grain of salt. And not sharing so much. I used to share things that sort of go delete all of those from the internet.
No record. I never did that. Plausible deniability.
Yeah. That's, yeah. I mean, it's kind of shocking how often I might just share something, especially in these inflection points or these bursts, around like a George Floyd or Palestine, or where there are these causes I believe in, and that I'm using myself as an example, but I'm by no means alone, and I've toned it way down for myself just because I realize it's actually often more destructive to pass on something when I haven't even really looked at it thoroughly, and I'm not even really sure what it says. And you're so wonderful for that as a filter, because I'll sometimes pass things to you, and you just naturally consume things in a certain way and analyze things, which is helpful. And so that's what I'm always wondering. It's like, well, what are the filters? And there have been apps that have emerged over time
Mm.
that have attempted to do this, right? Like, I'll try to pull one up. Yeah, it's ground, or I think it's called Ground Zero.
Mm.
Uh, Meter at the bottom, and it's like, oh, the bias is this way or this way. So
Oh
I
yeah.
absolutely believe in a perfect world we would all have the disposition and the ability and the time to soak in lots of different sources. But
Yeah.
I don't think that's the reality for many of us. So then it's like, okay, how do we actually then create another layer of filter where we trust
Yeah.
somebody else, which is theoretically what the anchors in the news were doing, right? They were
Yeah. They were standing in as like a family almost.
um and I could be wrong, but I thought maybe you said this or somebody else did recently that yeah, like the amount of trust even now for the kind of mainstream news is higher than other channels. And it's funny, just coming off of a big project where we were getting lots of news stories,
Yeah.
it still feels really good to get a
Yeah.
story on like CBS Chicago because it's like, hey, that's sort of the big one. It's
Yeah.
like the difference between getting on the New York Times bestseller list versus Amazon, which like
Yes.
even I have something on Amazon's best list. It's like a formula. It's like, it doesn't
Yeah.
mean that much anymore. The last thing I'll say is just I'm curious about sort of the presentation. I'm thinking about, I don't know much about how Democracy Now! Got started or is funded or anything,
Mm.
but it's got this classic
Yes.
newsroom
Yeah.
anchor. We're super fucking serious. Like you.
Yeah.
So like, how much does the presentation lend to the credibility of it? And it probably depends a lot on. It'd be so. I want to see that survey. Like, do you trust Democracy Now! And why? Do you trust this like iPhone footage because you know that somebody just shot that? And
Yeah. Yeah.
I
And
mean,
it
at
looks
least at
it
least
looks terrible.
at least for 5 more years until we can just tell AI to generate anything we want,
Yeah.
which we'll revisit this topic then.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, at that point, I think everyone's favorite AI is going to be like their Cronkite of the era. That's their new family member. Yeah, it is. Well, I do think, and I understand again the fear. There's been a lot of stuff shared, maybe on your algorithm. It's been less around. I don't know, but it's been heavy on mine in terms of how in the past like month plus, John Kerry, uh, Tim Walz, Kamala Harris, Hillary Clinton, Bill Gates. I don't know if I already said that. Like, have all talked about how control of media, and this is more like mass media or like pop media, like modern pop media of like human beings, what we can make, non-corporate media, independent media, the rise of that as a influential force equal to, if not greater than, traditional media, has a lot of people afraid and wanting to throw out the First Amendment functionally in order to somehow deal with this problem. And what I appreciate about it, and this relates to my theory, uh, my cognitive dissonance, like bias here, my theory that the Democrats should be in charge of highlighting problems, and the Republicans should be in charge of solving them generally. Um, Not that they're great at solving them either. They're just one is better at identifying, one is better at solving, I think, just in terms of percentages. Um, it's a major problem how real bullshit news looks like. And that's both at the New York Times under the New York Times masthead, Washington Post masthead, CBS News masthead, as well as things like Democracy Now! Or Straight News, No Bullshit, or Smarter News, or whatever. Like just presentation of, especially in social media, the ability to share these stories and kind of all these independent channels rising up and very quickly getting, especially with, if there's bias involved, I feel like they grow even faster. And then there's also like the centrist bias. Those are growing pretty fast too. People are like, where do I find independent journalism that's like legit? And I think people run to Substack because they're like, well, at least they've worked at the big papers, but they recognized they were full of shit too, and they left. And now they're trying to do it for real. Like everything is a narrative that we're trying to cleave to. And the sort of quote unquote quality of presentation, especially on online, like Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, whatever, YouTube, like the the intentional authenticity of presentation is often, I think, perhaps the most important thing, even more important than the story or the slant in which they're selling it. Because if it can quickly be reshared and it looks real, then that seems like you are the person who has their finger on the pulse of knowledge and you got it, And I think still being accepted by those places, like having, your what you're working on covered by, CBS Chicago is still a big deal. It's just less of a big deal of like, oh, this is a real thing that's happening and everything they're going to say about it is true. It's more just a fact of ultimately most of these organizations have some notable degree of, let's match the public percentage. 70% of it is about getting validated by a particular tastemaker. Like news programs are essentially like influencer content. I hope that pisses off somebody who works at a local station. But that's functionally how it is. Like if you can get coverage by it for your bar opening, for your activism, for your whatever, for the murder in your neighborhood that you want police to deal with or whatever, you need an influencer to kind of promote your stuff. And just by virtue of being on a broadcast channel that people don't have to pay streaming for, you're hopeful that will reach a number of people, and especially it will influence people of a certain age who still think the news is pretty legit to regard this as legit and maybe come alongside it, maybe support it financially. That'd be nice. Or also just, see it, be inspired by it and go and do likewise in their life. Right. I mean, that would almost be, that's the best payoff, is that people are like, oh my gosh, she's taking this very seriously. Why have I never thought seriously about that? What would happen if I did? You want, and like, so really the more eyeballs you can get it in front of, the better in that sense.
Yeah. I for one got super excited about social media in, I don't know, 2007, 2008. I happened to own a digital agency at the time. So it became a professional exploration as well. And it was like, oh, everybody gets a voice. And I still believe in that. I mean, I still believe that's fundamentally a good thing. It is interesting though, as we're always monitoring, and I mean, I want to say I hear this more on the left, but I also just hear more of the left so much in general. I can't really say for sure. But I do feel like and I think you've pulled some actual stats on this, but in my sense, like the people on the left are more willing to like throw out, free speech in the sense of, well, like, hey, yeah, but they're crazy, and yeah, but they're authoritarian, or yeah, but they're whatever. And I'm like, there's no yeah but to the First Amendment. Like that's like so fundamental.
No.
Everything. And I know it may be inconvenient, and we may have to solve, actually talk to each other and I don't know, solve things. But and so and then I got really disillusioned because so much of social media just ended up becoming a big ad network. And the podcasts that are popular are monetized. I mean, everything, right? It's like if you're not monetized, we have the luxury and the privilege of spending thousands of hours researching this hard-hitting news for all of you out of the goodness of our heart.
But you're welcome.
Yeah, are welcome. The other thing that comes to me is just, and this is not an energy I think usually convey, but it's that of hyper confidence or even overconfidence. And I feel like that's kind of what the war seems to be energetically, especially when you look at the more siloed networks like Fox or MSNBC, where it's just like, no, you're going to trust me because I am speaking to you with a confidence beyond anything else. And it's like, if I even have a crack in that confidence, all of a sudden, I worry you won't trust me.
And it's funny. It seems to work pragmatically. Like I feel like people are influenced by it, but it doesn't work in terms of principle. Like people are unconvinced by it, I think, being that around the same time, or maybe this is just May of last year, trust in government around the same sort of paradigm as media is down to trust that government is going to do the right thing is down to 22%. So in some ways, the people who come out, this is an interesting thing for us socially. The people who come out and proclaim things most confidently are the least trusted people. right before the in like 2019. I remember I've talked about this too many times, so I won't reference it fully again. But there was a poll on like trust in institutions, and the medical profession was not highly trusted. Doctors are not highly trusted. We have all these weird like. Again, I think most of these things I absorb through narrative, like fictional, dramatic fiction about how amazing and impressive doctors are because we make cool movies about the ones who save people's lives in these amazing circumstances, and we love the people whose lives they've saved. Or same thing with journalists. We have these people who like these intrepid reporters who uncover what everyone else is afraid to talk about. This is inspiring stuff, and I actually love the way in which it is inspiring, and I hope it inspires people to save people and to expose stories that need to be exposed. However, in reality, like confident blowhards who portray themselves as authorities seem to be generally like majority disliked for a long amount of time and distrusted by the majority of people. We're 20 plus years into the media distrust. I'm assuming much longer on government distrust. And so as people come along and just simply say things confidently, the good part of all this, there is fragmentation, there's danger here, there's concerns about civil war and enmity. The nice thing that I think you and I have always cleaved to about social media is like, here's a place for us to have have arguments, back it up with evidence. I mean, Instagram's kind of terrible for this because you can't link in the thing, but Facebook's good for it. And Twitter, that you can like put responses in with the data, with evidence, with data. Here's a published study. Here's a study on this. Here's a study on this. Here's the polling on this. Here's what this actually represents historically. Here's history.com. Here's this independent blah, blah, blah. You can literally hit them with 3 different sources, 3 different biases, and address these actual discrepancies in order to sort of prove your trustworthiness, because the implicit trust for news media is gone, and the implicit trust for government has never existed as long as I've been alive. And so that's gone. Now, the hard thing is our brains really want to trust something somewhere, right? I think we're made to follow, most of us, if not all of us, statistically all, 99.9999%, we are made to follow something trustworthy, and we long for things to be trustworthy, right? We long in our relationships, our loving relationships, and that's what we want love to be. And in some ways, we kind of want our government officials to love us. We want the news to love us as an audience. Like we want to be loved and spoken with honestly in love. And so in some ways this has helped create the calamity, but it does create some of the hope, and that it's still possible. But again, you'll note corporate media fostering a don't talk to them. Those people are crazy thing. And I think that is full. And the US government does it potently as well. It happens quite constantly. Don't talk to those people. They're crazy. Don't talk to those people. They're crazy. I actually saw someone post this who I know in real life who's been posting like super political content very heavily on Twitter, like retweeting things like 15, 20, 30 times a day. And I actually saw her retweet and post something from a pundit who was telling people how to share, that they were like, share and don't engage. Do not engage in any denialism. Do not engage. And I was just like, that is the worst. That is the worst advice I've seen in years, to not engage. If you have a strong idea or want to share a strong idea, we have to be willing to engage. I share strong ideas quite often, and I am fully willing to engage. And I do that as not because it's pleasant for myself or good for my digestion. It's inflammatory, in fact. I do it because I was like, how else do we figure this out? Now, granted, I'm that kind of a learner. I learn through conversation and argument. So I understand not everyone is, but it is incumbent upon all of us to learn how we best learn. And I mean, this is a great thing for coaching, right? Help people figure out, how do you learn? How do you process information? How do you falsify information? And go and pursue that before you hold a strong opinion on anything. Because I would love to just return to the days of 20 years ago when I would just say about things, oh, you know what I heard on NPR? That's all. That is the vehemence with which I would relay things I'd heard from the news. I would tell you the source I got it from, and then just relay the thing. I didn't hold it as though if you disagreed with it all of a sudden, I'd be like, well, NPR said, sounds like you're an idiot. I would just be like, oh yeah, I don't know. That's what they said. If you think something different, show me better than what they showed me, and you win ultimately in terms of like for the moment, right? That's the most likely thing to possibly have. And so we have that opportunity, I think, since very few people do trust the media, is okay, well, who do we trust and how do we establish trust? And then what are the best ways to establish trust? How do you establish trust, like with a source? Like if um you have people share, especially in social media, I think is a great example of this because it happens so often throughout the day. If you're on social media at all, you'll encounter like 9,000 things that you could engage with or could share, could not share. How do you establish trust with like who shares things that are trustworthy? And then how do you establish distrust in terms of you're like, oh, that's my friend, blah, blah, blah. They are love them to death, but get them talking about this, and I don't, they're not a trustworthy source.
I don't know. I feel like I'm basically rebuilding that system for myself. I mean,
Yeah.
through a lot of our interactions in our work and trying to scrutinize that more and be more disciplined. Because I place so much value in social trust.
Yeah.
And that's
That makes sense.
obviously a lot of us. And my feed is full of people who seem to have no interest in escaping their bubble, especially the
Yeah.
left, like progressive bubble. So
Yeah.
I'm finding myself trusting those people less because I guess that means I'm trusting people I perceive to be actually exposing themselves to multiple viewpoints more and more.
Yeah.
It's probably one of the things. But I want to, this is maybe a lot to drop in as we're perhaps closer to the end, but I
Yeah.
was just reminded of a model called the trust triangle from Frances Frey. I
Mm.
believe this is at least from Harvard Business Review. I think she actually teaches at Harvard.
Mm.
And this is a bit more about interpersonal trust
Yes.
and leadership, but I wonder how much of this could map. It's a triangle
I think
with
it does. Yeah.
with three dimensions: logic, authenticity, and empathy. Logic being, I know you can do it. Your reasoning and judgment are sound. I don't know, maybe we call that research.
Yeah.
Of authenticity, I experience the real you, and that's a fascinating thing to hold
Yeah.
if we map it to corporations. Like, what the hell is an authentic corporation? And
Yeah.
empathy, I believe you care about me and my success, which lots of, I mean, that's, I don't know, maybe that's brand, like,
Yeah. Yeah. That
or
is
I don't know.
interesting. Yeah. Or even on an individual, like, yeah, anchor to anchor or writer to writer basis, which is a wild thing to, yeah, that one I think maps the least only because you have no way really of assessing that. That's kind of really almost that would, for someone you don't literally know, that would map on top, empathy and authenticity would almost map on top of each other because
Yeah, and I'm thinking
they're
maybe,
both just purely perceptual.
right. My definition of brand actually probably is more like authenticity. Like
Yeah.
it's my experience with you.
Yes, that is consistent. Yeah. And I think it's so
Right.
funny because authenticity is probably the thing that sparks me the most to get into my logic and proof brain. That if I'm like, and we've talked about this when you've sent me links and stuff, and I'm like, well, wait a second. No, okay, if you apply this principle, they can't say what they're saying. Like it's a self-invalidating principle or whatever. So for me, though that strikes me as a lack of authenticity. Although, to devil's advocate that, someone being hypocritical could be an authentic part of who they are. So it's not that they're being inauthentic to themselves, but they're being inauthentic as themselves, if that makes sense. Like
It does.
their construct is inauthentic. I mean, I think that about politicians, right? I think whatever, like Harris versus Trump, right? I think Trump is pretty authentic. I don't like what his authenticity reveals about himself. I don't find Harris very authentic. Like I don't really know her when she's being truthful or saying what she means or whatever. So like those are and I don't like either of them. So well, the conclusion is I don't trust either one. But to me, the authenticity thing is actually probably key. Is to me is the biggest driver. I'm sure for other people it would be empathy. Like, yeah, that person's real, but they again that might be that's the Donald Trump problem. He seems less empathic, I would say, subjectively, than Harris does. It's just like a pop example we can all reference.
Right. In this model, yeah, it's funny. I agree. I would give Trump a point for authenticity. I want to give her a point for logic. I don't know if that's fair or just a predetermined bias.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think I would give her a point for empathy. So I think think in this model, I trust her slightly more.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, isn't that funny? Yeah, where she is, well, and it's funny because she's actually in program, she's much more similar to corporate media, and that she has like a very particular presentation style. She's particular, like speaks in sound bites, like whereas this is, I think, one of Trump's successes or whatever, is that he's much more modern in the way that he relates. He's a dude talking. He's a dude talking for 2 flipping hours, right? And so some of it you're gonna be like, I don't even understand what you're talking about. Some of it, I was like, that sounds terrible. Some of it's like, oh yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Like it's a big old jumble of just like, here's a person. And to me, I pursue for both of them, I find them inauthentic and that I don't feel like they're consistent in terms of application of principle. But as it relates to, but I think they're good stand-ins for media because I do think media is so hyper partisan pretty aggressively that even as something as dumb as did someone work at McDonald's or not, like we don't have a media at present that will be honest about that. That's pretty messed up. So then I'm often left with like, well, and I probably have a bias towards the Shaggy Dog style, which is like, well, tell me everything, because that's kind of how I am. Just tell me everything you're thinking then. So then I can ascertain what the heck is going on, because I don't super trust you anyway as like a newscaster or a writer or a politician or whatever. Yeah.
That's what we need. The Shaggy journalist. We need another Shaggy dog movie.
Yes, exactly. See, dog. Well, and guarantee as soon as you say that, there are people out there who are like, well, dogs are better than humans. So that would actually be an improvement. Like if you could turn Trump into a dog, like I think he would gain millions of votes. If you could turn newscasters into dogs, I think people's trust would skyrocket overnight. It would be at least up in the high 40s.
Just don't try to eat them.
You don't eat. I mean, I'll eat it. Hey, listen, if someone's cooking dogs tonight, I'll eat a dog. I just want to say, speaking of media distrust, right? The whole Haitians eating dogs, eating cats thing. I just want to say this because I haven't said this, and I want to say it out loud in a recorded fashion that people can reference in the future. I don't care if you eat cats and dogs. If you're eating cats and dogs in a delicious stew, I will come to your house and I will eat a cat with you. I will eat a dog with you. I don't care. I don't think it's crazy. I don't think it's weird. If it was someone's pet and you stole it from them and ate their cat and dog, I do think that is unethical. But to simply just eat a cat and a dog that's like a stray cat or stray dog, not weird, not savage. It might be atypical, but I don't care. We eat pigs and they're smart as heck. I eat octopus and they are teachers. So let's not start pretending like eating some dogs is somehow barbaric, and not eating cows that are sweet and kind also isn't barbaric. It's just we're come on, guys. We're all just killing stuff and eating stuff. That's literally how we survive. We have to kill a plant. We have to kill something. Everyone has to kill something to eat. Let's kill the media to eat, folks. I have not overly challenged my cognitive dissonance as to being relatively freshly distrustful of corporate media. But no, we should not trust corporate media. We should, with more, it used to be a grain of salt, and now just carry at least carry a single shaker. I like the pink salt, the Himalayan pink, with you for every news item that you encounter.
Maybe one of those big therapeutic pink salt crystals that I understand they actually usually mine in Puerto Rico.
Oh, nice.
But,
I'll have to fact check that.
That's what the people in Puerto Rico told us. They were like,
yeah.
well, we mine the Himalayan salt. I'm like, I don't care. I'm on vacation.
Yeah. Is that where the Himalayas are?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with we should not trust corporate media.
Yeah. Sweet. So all the more reason,
but I trust you.
I trust you as well. Even if you send me things that I find inaccurate, again, because I trust you in terms of empathy and authenticity, then all I have to do is be like, well, logically, here's the issue with this, and that thing. And then what do you think about that? Which I feel like if most people could have a little bit of a slightly more open, that's not heart specifically, but a heart is part of it. But just like a more open, be prone to more openness with others, even if you think you'll disagree about things, to just get it out in the open and address it. And let's all parse it out together. I feel like we are all we are collectively everyone else's like best resource for navigating a world where we are absent this trust. And I think a lot of people are so afraid it seems quite weird. A lot of people are very afraid of what is happening, and they want to control it, and I think it's going to get a dark path if we just try to like manhandle it and make it back into whatever it was before. At some point, it's so broken at this point. We're watching it turn into something else, and we kind of have to stay nearby and keep talking to each other as we navigate what it transforms into.
Yeah, and I'm just contemplating how you're sometimes perceived as on the social medias, and I don't know, I won't even go into how you are, but it's my sense is that you actually in this framework, like you have a lot of empathy the way it's expressed, because you care about all of our success and all of our increased knowledge and awareness and accuracy. And
Yeah, yeah,
but when that meets like a really hardened viewpoint,
yeah,
in any way, it's perceived as sometimes like an attack, or that you're the one
yeah.
being dogmatic, and you're like, well, no, I'm like, I'm the one actually
Yeah,
observing it.
yeah.
But
I think it's a fundamental misunderstanding of what empathy is. I think a lot of people think empathy is passive. I think a lot of people think empathy ultimately just means to like experience the feelings or even sometimes thoughts, but really feelings, to experience the feelings of someone else. Compassion is to suffer with someone, like alongside them. But empathy is almost to like mirror, to like be in somewhat inside or cohabitate those feelings and emotions. And as I become a more empathic person, I become much more strident, because this is how I would deal with myself in that place. I wouldn't just be like, oh, sweetheart. I would like, oh, no, you're in trauma. Let's get you out of trauma. You're in false trauma. Get out of your false trauma. That's terrible. Let's get out of there. It's like watching stuff, and it's like the Good Samaritan concept. If you see someone like ideologically beaten and bleeding on the side of the street, you don't think too much about like how super gently you're going to pick them up and get them to help. You don't want to break their neck, but at the same time, you're not really going to be too worried about like, oh, I'm going to carefully do that. You're like, oh no, like you're in a trauma, you're in danger. Fire. I think to me, like being ignored is the only thing that to me that lacks like empathy and compassion. Because then you're saying you're like, I'm separating myself from you. Therefore, I will have no with. There's no come. There's no prefix of coming together there. So let's come together. Come together right now.
right now, all right,
Over this.
the co-singing on Zoom.
Yep.
All right, I love you.
Love you.
Thank you.
Love you.
See you
Trust
soon.
you. Have a beautiful
Trust
week.
you. You too.